Today we'll be working in my workbook called Joseph, Son, Slave, Prisoner, and Commander. This workbook covers Genesis 37 to 41. Now, looking at the table of contents, we have already done chapter 1, which was Joseph and his dreams. Today we're going to be doing chapter 2, Joseph is sold. So let's go to chapter 2. Joseph is sold, Genesis 37, verses 12 through 36. Genesis 37:12. Now his brothers had gone to graze the father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. Where did the brothers, these would be the 10 brothers older than Joseph, go to graze their father's flocks? Shechem. This would be about 60 miles. There are several possible reasons why the brothers took the flock all that way. Let's list them. Their father Jacob had a piece of land there, according to Genesis 33:19. Let's go ahead and read that. For 100 pieces of silver, Jacob bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of land where he pitched his tent. And then Genesis 34:25. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. And so B would be there are no males there to give them any trouble. And C, they wanted to get as far away from their father and Joseph as they could. Those are possible reasons why they went there. We never know why they went that far. Scriptures continue, Genesis 37:14. So he said to them, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent them off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? Why is Jacob sending Joseph to where the brothers are tending the flocks? And he sent Joseph to see if all was well with his brothers, and then bring word back to him. Look at Genesis 34:30 below. Why would Jacob be concerned? Genesis 34:30. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land around Shechem. We are few in number. If they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. Looking at Genesis 34:30, Jacob remembers that he was worried about the Canaanites and Perizzites attacking them. So he thought maybe that could have happened. So, opinion question. Joseph is 17. The boys as young as 15 are out tending sheep. Why do you think that Joseph is home instead of tending the flocks with his brothers? Because Jacob didn't want him to go out. He wanted him right next to him. It was his favorite son. Were the brothers around Shechem? No, they weren't. What would Joseph be looking for? Looking around Shechem and wandering around the fields and asking them. So what is he looking for in the fields? Probably evidence that they were there, evidence of what they might have gone. I don't know what he would find in the fields, but he was looking around in the fields to try to figure things out. The scriptures continue. He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks? They've moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. Where did the brothers go with the flocks? To Dothan. This would have been 20 miles further north. We don't know the man who advised Joseph, but we can definitely come to some conclusions. Based on Genesis 34:25, would the man probably know who the brothers were that Joseph was looking for? Yes. Because they had caused such a problem in Shechem that everybody around there knew who they were. Also based on Genesis 34:25, why would the man probably not have talked with Joseph's brothers directly, but listened in on their conversation? Because he was wary of these people that butchered a whole bunch of other people, I would think. Since their flocks would have been large, what would have been a logical reason why the brothers would have moved along toward Dothan? Because there was land for grazing land there, perhaps, that there was a problem with the land that they had and moved to land that was more fertile. The scriptures continue. Genesis 37:18. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. This is his brothers plotting to kill Joseph. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Who did the brothers see coming towards them even though he was a distance away? Joseph. Based on how Jacob used Joseph as an overseer of their work, would they have expected him eventually? Yeah, I think they would eventually have expected him to come. What did they plan to do to Joseph? Kill him. After they killed Joseph, where were they going to put the body? In one of the cisterns. Dothan literally means two cisterns or two wells. In order to have people assume that Joseph was killed and devoured by a ferocious animal, what more would they have to do to Joseph than just kill him? They would have to have some kind of evidence, either his cloak or whatever, some kind of evidence. What did the brothers nickname Joseph here? That dreamer. Do we have evidence that Joseph's dreams were part of the reason of their hatred of him? Yes. What is the evidence? Because they still remember it after all this time. And of course, they didn't like the fact that the young man thought that he was going to be better than the rest of them. Realize again, if Joseph had not angered his brothers enough for them to take drastic measures, then Joseph would not have been in the right place at the right time 22 years later. The scriptures continue. Genesis 37:21. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue Joseph from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Who objected to the murder of Joseph? That would be Reuben. What did Reuben suggest to do to Joseph instead? Just throw him in the cistern where he couldn't get out. What did Reuben mean to do when the rest of the brothers weren't looking? Rescue Joseph and bring him back to his father. Some people say that Reuben was being the responsible one by stopping the killing of Joseph by his brothers. Do you think he handled this situation correctly, and why? You could look at it that way. He didn't fully save Joseph, but on the other hand, this he thought would be something the brothers would accept. Others believe that Reuben wanted to stop the murder but took the deceptive way out so as to not lose the respect of his brothers. Do you think he was deceptive or smart? I think he did not stand up to his brothers, that is true. And so he used a way that they would probably agree with. Do you credit Reuben for saving Joseph's life or hold him responsible for what happened? Well, saving his life, yes. Saving his life, I think, yes. The scriptures continue. Genesis 37:23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. What did they remove from Joseph before they threw him into the cistern? His coat, his ornate robe that Jacob had given him. Why do you think they removed Joseph's robe? Because that was the issue, that they didn't like this ornate robe, and they didn't want him to have it. So they took it from him. What was the cistern normally used for? Water. Is this cistern thought to still be in existence today? Looking below. This is Joseph's well today. It is believed by Muslims to be the site of the pit in which Joseph, a figure which is part of both biblical and Quranic narratives, was thrown by his brothers. So it seems to be still in existence today, if it's the right one. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:25. And they sat down to eat their meal. They looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Who did they see on the main road coming from Gilead? Ishmaelites. These Ishmaelites would also be called Mennonites. Mennonites. Both of these may be true. Both Ishmael, whose mother was Hagar, and Midian, whose mother was Keturah, are sons of Abraham, and their families often worked together. What were their camels loaded with? Spices, balm, and myrrh. Where were the Ishmaelites heading? Egypt. Looking below, what is myrrh used for? Jeremiah 8:22. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is there no healing for the wound of my people? Myrrh is used for balm or healing substance. Oh, I'm sorry. Myrrh is used for foods and beverages. Myrrh is a flavoring component. In manufacturing, myrrh is used as a fragrance, an incense, and as a fixative in cosmetics. It's also used in embalming. So, looking, what is myrrh used for? Food, beverages, flavoring component, fragrance, incense, etc. What is balm of Gilead used for? Healing. There now. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:26. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Who suggests that they sell Joseph to the traders instead of kill him? Judah. What is his reasoning for selling Joseph instead of killing him? That they could at least get something out of it, rather than killing where they would get nothing out of it. Should Judah be commended for saving his brother from death or condemned for selling his brother to traders? I would say condemned because I don't know that they were going to kill him. They just put him in the cistern. So I think he should be condemned for selling Joseph. We will discover later that Reuben was not with the brothers at this time. Do you think if he was, he would have stopped the sale or let it continue? I think somehow he would have stopped the sale. He's trying to protect Joseph, but so I think he would have tried to stop the sale. Joseph is Jacob's favorite son, and his death will be devastating to Jacob. 22 years later, when the brothers are unknowingly dealing with the living Joseph, and Joseph tricks the brothers into having Benjamin, the youngest brother of all, forced into slavery, Judah then says the following, Genesis 44:30-31. So now, if the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't here, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Does Judah seem to have learned the consequences from the devastating sorrow of Jacob concerning the death of Joseph and think better of it with Benjamin? Actually, it does. He does seem to be wiser in the treatment of Benjamin. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:28. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Did the brothers sell Joseph to the traders? Yes. How much did they receive for him? 20 shekels of silver. Where did the Ishmaelites take Joseph? To Egypt. From Genesis 42 below, we know how Joseph reacted. How did he react to all this? Genesis 42:21. They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother Joseph. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us. Joseph pleaded for his life. Here we see the statement that Joseph will later say in action. Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Thinking they squashed Joseph's dream of being in charge, in reality, they contribute to the fulfillment of it. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:29. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't here. Where can I turn now?" Reuben was not with the other brothers. When what was accomplished? Joseph was sold. Where do you think Reuben was? He's probably out with the sheep. What was Reuben planning on doing? He was planning to take Joseph back to Jacob. In the future, based on Genesis 42:22 below, does Reuben think Joseph is dead? Genesis 42:22, Reuben replied, "Did I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." Yes, according to that scripture, he believes Joseph is dead. Although we don't see it in scripture, we know that Reuben will discover what the brothers did with Joseph. Knowing that he will eventually agree to the lie, what do you think his initial reaction was to it? He was probably upset, but he aligns with his brothers, so he tells the lie in agreement with them. All the 10 brothers intend to keep this lie until their graves. What does the scripture in Luke below say about attempting to keep things hidden? Luke 8:17. For there's nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. So the scripture in Luke gives us the idea that nothing is hidden, that eventually it will come out, see the light of day. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:31. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Based on verse 31, we know it's not just sheep in their flock, but what? Goats. What did the brothers do to the special robe of Joseph? They dipped the robe in the blood of the goat. Do the brothers tell Jacob a lie or allow him to come to his own conclusion? They allow him to come to his own conclusion. They don't change it. So Jacob the deceiver is himself being deceived. Did Jacob recognize the robe as Joseph's? Yes. In his grief, Jacob actually makes an error in his conclusion. Can you see it? What is it? Some ferocious animal has devoured him and Joseph is torn to pieces. That's his conclusion. Jacob, some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph had been torn to pieces, but is the robe actually torn? A closer inspection would have made him realize that something's not quite right, because the robe isn't torn in two. Genesis 37:34. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. The common way of showing grief and mourning a death in the Bible included weeping, that's Psalm 6:6, and crying loudly, Ruth 1:9. Sometimes mourners would sprinkle ashes, dust, or dirt upon themselves, Joshua 7:6, and tear their clothing, 2 Chronicles 34:27. Mourning was a time to wear a coarse goat hair garment called sackcloth, Jonah 3:6. What did Jacob do to mourn the death of Joseph? He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth. We learned something new about Jacob in verse 35. Instead of Dinah, the only daughter we now know that Jacob had other daughters. And Genesis 46:7 and 15 will confirm this. How long is Jacob going to mourn? Until he joins his son in the grave. The word translated grave is actually the word Sheol, which means the abode of the dead. This is where the dead went before the death of Jesus. This concept is actually seen often in the Old Testament, as the Hebrews understood the abode of the dead well. Because it's been translated often to grave, we do not realize it's a place rather than a concept. It's sad to think all the time that Jacob mourns the death of Joseph, that none of the brothers ever break down and tell him what really happened. Even after Joseph is actually found, it doesn't appear that Jacob ever found out the truth. Scriptures continue. Genesis 37:36. Meanwhile, the Mennonites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Who did the Mennonites sell Joseph to? Potiphar. What do we know here about Potiphar? He's one of Pharaoh's officials. He's the captain of the guard. Captain of the guard means that he was in charge of the personal protection of the king, his family, and their court. We also know that he was in charge of the prisons, as we'll later find out in Genesis 43. How different is Joseph to the people he's being sold to? A. Genesis 46:34. Your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did. Then you'll be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. What was Joseph's profession? He was a shepherd. Genesis 43:32. They served him by himself, the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to Egyptians. What nationality is Joseph? He is Hebrew. C. Genesis 42:22-23. Reuben replied, Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give accounting for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. In the beginning, Joseph did not speak Egyptian, but Hebrew. Genesis 42:8. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Did Hebrews and Egyptians dress the same? No. So now we come to the crossword. And hopefully I can do this without looking, because I don't have the notes beside me. I better get my notes here just a second. Just so that I know for sure that I'm giving you the right answer. Here we go. All righty. Yep, I thought that was right. Number 2 across, the Ishmaelites' camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. Number 5, the brothers had moved from Shechem to Dothan. Number 8, other than Joseph, who is the one brother who is not out with the other 10? Benjamin. Number 9, Jacob sent Joseph to his brothers from the valley of Hebron. 10, who told his brothers not to kill Joseph? Reuben. Number 14, Jacob sent Joseph to see if all was well with his brothers. Yeah, and their flocks. Number 15, the brothers dipped the ornate robe in the blood of a goat. 16, who suggested they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites? Judah. 18, what is a cistern in that area used for? Water. 20, initially the brothers wanted to kill Joseph and throw him into a cistern. Okay, one down. Ishmaelites came from Midian, from Gilead. Really? From Gilead? They came down from Gilead? Okay, they came down from Gilead. Okay. Number 3, who was Joseph sold to in Egypt? Potiphar. Number 4, where did the 10 brothers originally graze their father's flocks? Shechem. Let's see, number 6. When Jacob decided Joseph was dead, what type of clothes did he put on? Sackcloths. 7, Joseph was sold for Joseph was sold for he was sold for 20 shekels of silver. 11, the Ishmaelites took Joseph where? To Egypt. After the rest of the brothers were not looking, Reuben was going to rescue, I think, Joseph and take him back to his father. 13, when the brothers saw Joseph coming, they called him a dreamer. 17, a man, yes, a man heard where the brothers had moved their flocks. And 19, before they threw Joseph into the cistern, they took off his ornate robe. So that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.